It's Todd. It's Todd. There he is. Seems somewhat of a smile. I can't tell. What is that? Okay. I've been bugging you for like 6 days. It's funny. This one really bothers me. And you always seem to be like a therapist. You're like, all right, I understand. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I see our time is up. So we'll see you next week. Because I'm like, Todd, get in there and find this. Find this. This abuse that I believe occurs every single time they collect our money with the CCA because they're going to reduce our CO2. And I said, get in there and get it. I'm all angry. And then you're like, you write back, okay, well, we'll see what we can find. So feed the angry beast. But before you do it, I just want to put things in perspective. So 500 and some thousand Washingtonians said, we don't want the CCA. Vote yes on 2117. And Inslee didn't do himself any favors when he said,
this is going to have minimal impact, if any. Pennies. We're talking about pennies. Potentially.
Yeah, like 55 pennies or something like that. And then during a debate with former Democratic Senator Reuben Carlisle, he was saying this regarding where the money's going to go. So they take the money from us, and then it goes to the government, and then the government's going to reduce our CO2. And, you know, where's the program, and who's going to monitor the programs? And here is Carlisle.
But I will say that on the issue of accountability, there's actually in the law, it's a 90-page bill. I acknowledge that. It's a lot of details. And there's hundreds of pages of Washington Administrative Code, which implements the law. Extremely detailed accountability and transparency requirements that every program that receives funding from the investments has to prove its impact on emissions. It's in the law. It's in the administrative code.
Oh, good. It's in the law. So we should bye. Todd, thanks for staying with us. We appreciate you coming on. All right. So it's very transparent. It's in the law. They have to follow the letter of the law. They take our money. It then goes to into Olympia, and then Olympia gets how much altogether have they I use the word rob, and you go, okay, calm down, take your medicines. How much money have they taken from us so far with the Climate Commitment Act?
So in 2.5 years,
right,
they have raised for the CO2 tax just under $4 billion.
All right. They've stolen $4 billion. They've taken the $4 billion from us. And where's the money gone?
So one of the things that Reuben just said there is that they have to prove the effectiveness. That's not true at all. There is a report that comes out that says, okay, here's what we spent the money on. And then it like, did it have an impact? And if you look at that report from the Department of Ecology, and it depends on how you count it, but basically about 3/4 of the projects, 3/4 of the money, they actually have a column that says, is there any measurable CO2 reduction? And 3/4 of the dollars say that there is zero measurable CO2 reduction from those projects.
So 75% of the $4 billion that they've robbed from us, they have no evidence that it has done anything for the reduction of CO2.
Not all of the $4 billion, but yes, the first round that they spent, that was the case. That's probably true. And actually, if you look at the current budget, they keep spending on the same thing. So yeah, that trend is going to continue. So when Reuben says they have to prove it, that's not what the law says. The law says they just have to report it. But if they report, hey, we did this project and it did nothing, there's no requirement that they stop spending money on that. And in fact, many of the things that report says don't work, guess what? They're still spending money on in the next budget.
So when I was talking to you about a week ago, while I was off my meds on this thing, I said, find out, is it so is it going to Olympia, and then is it Inslee's buddies, or is it Carlisle's friends? Like, where does the money go? Follow the money to prove that this is just, grift, fraud, abuse. And you, again, were like, well, it's not necessarily that clean cut. You can't connect the lines, but...
Yeah, so I think that the biggest, there is definitely some grift. And so there was spending that would go to like an organization that, Governor Inslee's maritime advisor was in to look at offshore wind turbine. I think that's clearly probably, we'll call it corruption. But to his credit, actually, Governor Ferguson vetoed that. So that money, which was in the budget, actually got pulled out. But that's not the case. There's other cases where money does get through, but that's not the biggest chunk. The biggest chunk of money is actually, more just expanding government. So I looked at the operating budget, which spends about $175 million over the next 2 years. And this is just the operating. There's also capital, which also spends money. That's a geek thing, but I just want to make that clear. But in the operating budget, about 3/4, about 70% of the money goes to more planning and more government. That's really where the money gets spent, is just hiring more government planners and giving it to local government planning agencies. So there is a portion that you're concerned about, which is it goes to people who are cronies and things like that.
Yeah.
But really the part I'm concerned about, which is the biggest bucket, which is money that just goes to government and is just frankly wasted on, shelf art and planning and studies and things like that, and doesn't actually help the environment.
Right. So and you sent me the list. They hire a certain number of people, and then they say, okay, now we've got the people in place, and now they're going to do a study of some sort. And then maybe it'll be a year, 2 years until the study comes out. And then, but it doesn't matter. You're still paying. You're just growing the number of people that are working for the government that are receiving this money. And they, again, cannot show or don't want to show how much CO2 has been reduced. In fact, the Washington Policy Center is suing the Department of Ecology because you have said to them, hey, according to your rules, every 2 years, you have to show us where we are on CO2. And you said, I think the last time we had you on, it was 2021 was the last number that they gave?
That's correct. So the CO2 tax has been in place since 2023, and we don't even have any idea about whether it's working, about whether we're making progress or not, because the most recent data that we have is 3-4 years old. So that it's not only it's just bad policy, but it's also they're violating the law. And when we sued them, they admit that they're violating the law. They just said it's too hard to collect.
Wait a minute. But the law says you got to collect it. You got to tell us what it is. And they're saying that it's too complicated or it just takes up too much time. So we're just going to ignore that one.
Yeah, they said, well, we have to we get the data, some of the data from the federal government, and then we have to do our quality control, and quality control takes time. And yeah, we could, have data from 2022 and even 2023, but we've got to go through it. And so, yeah, we're not going to follow the law. Now, that's not, if I said that to them when they came to me and said, hey, you're violating the law, Todd, the Department of Ecology wouldn't go, oh, well, it's too hard for you, Todd. That's fine, but that's the argument that they made with us. But I mean, I think the frustrating thing is that people want to help the environment and they don't feel like there is an alternative. So they hope that government can do the job, and government is falling down. And what ends up happening is that you get this silly rhetoric. So, for instance, one of the things that you hear about, we have to have this CO2 tax money and it's going to good things. It's helping fight asthma. So out of $174 million, the total amount that is dedicated to fighting asthma in the operating budget is $300,000. $300,000 out of $174 million. So, but they don't talk about, we're going to spend $22 million to send to local governments for planning. They talk about the $300,000 that goes for asthma. And there's a lot of a shell game. And again, the problem is that too much of the money goes into government and is wasted, and not enough money goes to good things like fighting asthma or like restoring forest health so that we don't get smoky summers. Those
that was
things
a big
are justifiable and can be defended.
Yeah,
can be defended. We don't do that.
Yeah, former Senator Carlisle had mentioned, we're going to do this and this with wildfires. And you looked into the numbers on that, where the money's going. It seems like what they're doing is producing more paper that could possibly catch fire. But they're not implementing it into any sort of program necessarily. It's just more studying, more hiring. Where has the money gone for something like wildlife or wildfire management?
There is some money that actually does get on the ground. There are some studies, there's no doubt about it, but there is some money that actually gets on the ground. But again, if you count everything in the most generous way, it's $6 million. So about 4%. Again, what we're talking is 70% is going to government and planning, and 5% is going to things that people actually want.
You always break everything down. Every time I have you on, I love the fact you always break something down. Here is the CO2. Here's the cost to reduce the CO2. And then you always are able to find the cheapest methods of reducing CO2. If you want to do it, you can spend $1 and do it this way, or you can have the government do it and it's going to cost $40, $50. So you always look at the waste, I know you don't like necessarily always corruption, but for me, when I fill up my car and I see that we are now, number 3 in the United States, right? It's California and Pennsylvania and Washington. So we now have the additional 6 cents on top. And then the latest, I think, number you had come out with when it came to the auction for the credits, where was it? Was it at 56 cents?
56, yep.
Yeah.
In terms of, it's 46 cents a gallon is what the CO2 tax adds. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, you just mentioned the 6 cents. That's different. So the 6 cent per gallon increase that we just saw July 1st goes on top of that 46 cents.
Right. So then, and I put that in my tank, and then I saw from the Washington Policy Center that I think we have the 47th worst roads. We're somewhere in the list when they had done surveys of road conditions managed by the state. I think we were ranking somewhere near the bottom.
Correct. So the U.S. Department of Transportation has a number of rankings about quality of roads, how much are acceptable, how much are needed repair, bridges, and a variety of things like that. And when you look at our roads, the percentage of our roads that are acceptable, it ranks us 47th in the nation. So we have the 3rd highest gas taxes, right? It's now 55 cents per gallon, a little more than 55 cents per gallon after the 6 cent per gallon increase. We have a 46 cent per gallon CO2 tax. So it's more than $1 a gallon that the state is taking. And yet we have the 47th best roads in terms of sort of miles that are acceptable.
Now, I know that the Ukrainian war continues to deeply affect us here in the state of Washington when it comes to our gas
But
tax.
only us.
It just does. It's weird. It is really weird. But don't question. Are we now more expensive than Hawaii for gas?
No, Hawaii we're still 3rd overall behind California and Hawaii.
Okay.
Now, Hawaii, of course, it's very expensive to get the gas there. So, it would take a lot for us to get past them. We have been in the last 2 years. We did.
Well, that's the Ukrainian war. That was the Ukrainian war. All right. So give us.
Well, the other fun thing is that it's always, it's oil company greed, but apparently oil company greed stops at Washington State's borders. Look, the fact that we have $1 a gallon of taxes in a variety of different ways is playing a big role in driving our costs.
Just leave us with some hope. Is there anything that anybody in Olympia can do coming up in the next legislative process that would give us some relief at the pump?
I think it's unlikely that they're going to do that. And the reason is that we actually are now, despite passing the largest tax increase in state history, not just gas taxes, but other things, we now have they've overspent their budget already. We already know we're going to have a shortfall even after that. So I think that's unlikely. But I will just add this one thing. We just had 4th of July when you were texting me about this data rather than our nation's independence. And we did, one thing I just do want to say, I don't want to come on here be a negative Nelly because there are a lot of people who, sort of talk down the United States. And really, we should be thankful that we live here in so many ways. And so one of the things that we have done is we interviewed a number of immigrants in Washington State about why they came to Washington, why they came to America, and why they think it's such a great place. So, yeah, we have a lot of problems, and we will highlight those, and we need to fix them. But I don't want people to forget and and stop being thankful for how really, truly remarkable our country is and the opportunities that we have and our ability to address those problems and fix them.
I am somewhat ashamed of the fact that I was writing you on 4th of July, and you did send back a positive American spirit response. And then at the Washington Policy Center, you asked people, it's there at the website, about what you love about America. And it really is remarkable. You're right. You know, on the 4th of July, Joe and I wanted to find somebody who had moved here to this country. And it's hard for us to be able to appreciate the great value and virtues of this country when we're already here. But when you can compare and contrast coming from some other country, they see truly the land of opportunity. So we'll leave it on a positive note. Todd Myers.